As much as I do not want this crisis to escalate, unfortunately, the last 24 hours have shown that this crisis is going to do anything but escalate, unfortunately. Um, and this is entirely because of Putin. I want to make this incredibly clear. There are a lot of people claiming that this blatant act of Russian aggression is either somehow the fault of America. It absolutely isn't. America has absolutely nothing to do in this conflict. Its only actions so far have been saying we are not going to put NATO troops on the ground. Um, Ukraine, even though it wants to join NATO, it's very likely that the NATO countries will say no to it joining. Um, Again, which torpedoes the main reason for Vladimir Putin wanting to start this war and go through all this blatant acts of aggression on this front. And of course, then you get to the NATO argument. And as I've said, same here. Ukraine has every right, if it wants to ask NATO that it wants to join the alliance. NATO can turn around and say, well, we don't want you to join. And NATO has every right to be able to ask and do that. There is this bizarre thing that this sovereign country can't ask to join this pact. And bear in mind, a lot of other Eastern European countries joined NATO for what you are seeing this very reason today. And of course, we now get to the third round, of course, of blame on this. That has definitely escalated in the last couple of hours, that this is somehow Ukraine's fault, that somehow Ukraine, a country that has been very clear since all this began, saying we do not want to get invaded. We are trying to defend our own integral, sovereign territory because of, again, Russian-backed separatists and interference over this. That this is how it rolls, unfortunately, with Russia, and this is what other countries have been fearing for years, and of why they joined NATO to begin with, because this is what unfortunately has happened. So to go over what essentially has happened in the last 24 hours. With this, I've got a nice little map to show you. So essentially what you are looking at here is the disputed area, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. And as you can see, obviously the red is the Russia, where Russia is, and obviously the yellow is Ukraine. And the area, obviously, as you can see, shaded with the red, is where the Russian-backed, supplied, and again, pretty much controlled by Russia, currently control. The rest is still Ukraine, and of course, that line that you can see is what is called the line of contact, where the essential much of the, shall we say, Ukrainian military is at the moment to essentially, stop this civil war that they've decided to have started. But what has happened? And ultimately, this has been a blatant act of Russian aggression here. What has essentially happened is that last night, Russia decided to recognize the Republic of Donetsk, which basically, as you can see on here, are the full areas of Luhansk and Donetsk, basically meaning that Russia is saying that all these areas, even though, again, this is the area where they control, well, the rebels control at the moment, that is now a piece of their sovereign territory. And bear in mind, at the moment, the area where they control is actually the majority area of where people in Ukraine who mostly identify as Russian currently live. So not only that would be taking over those areas, but the vast majority of people there do not identify as being ethnically Russian. They identify as being, Ukrainian. And again, there are large differences between someone who is Ukraine, someone who is from Russia, even though Vladimir Putin went on a very rambling speech last night, which we'll get into in a bit, about how that doesn't really matter where currently people come from, and the rights of civil ships for these people at the moment don't really matter, which again is incredibly worrying for this area. So what does this mean? Well, essentially, as you can see, this is the line of conflict at the moment. And Putin has ordered Russian troops to cross the border into these occupied areas, essentially because they have decided to recognize this republic. They have now using that as a justification to say that we are going in there as peacekeepers. And remember, this is a massive area of land to suddenly claim when the rebels themselves were only able to take about this and have been, again, since the conflict started, steadily but slowly pushed back to these, again, to these borders. This is a blatant act of Russian aggression in this way, and they are using the pretext of peacekeeping to essentially now send troops across the border. And of course, you know what happens next, because remember, Russia has said that the full areas you can see here on the map of Luhansk and Donetsk fully belong to the Republic of Donetsk, not Ukraine. Meaning, what's going to happen when the Russian troops pull up against this line? This is where the flashpoints are going to happen. As at the moment, that has not happened yet. We have heard the reports that, again, Putin has said, given his assent to Russian troops to start crossing the border. We haven't heard if that has happened yet or not, but the fact that that's been rubber stamped already is incredibly worrying. This is why we've already had the EU, the UK government and the US government both say that they are going to put sanctions on Russia here. This is a blatant act of Russian aggression. And I'm sorry, you cannot put it any other two ways. This is an escalation, not by the West, not by NATO, not by the USA, not by the UK, but by Russia. And as we've said before, what do you think is going to happen to this republic? It's not going to last long, because what's going to happen is you're going to get another very, very suspicious referendum where about 95.5%, as what happened in Crimea, just suddenly vote to become part of Russia again. And remember, most of where we're talking about the civil war has actually happened within those current areas of control that you can see of like the Russian backed separatist control that you can see in that map. It hasn't happened in any of those two other areas. So most of those two regions are overwhelmingly pro-Ukrainian and want to be part of Ukraine, not these separatist back moves, which again is incredibly worrying, because now that Putin has said we recognize like that area, the Donetsk Republic, as a sovereign area in a sovereign territory, and now they've sent troops into peacekeep, whatever that might mean, it becomes incredibly worrying what could happen potentially over the next 24 hours. And I'm sure, as once I posted this video, it could very well be out of date, and again the situation could have very well escalated even further. So we have to hope here that this again does very much de-escalate, but Putin here is the one who has escalated it. It is not America, it's not been NATO, it has not been the UK, and it has certainly not been Ukraine, which I've seen some lefties, notably tankies, pushing that narrative very recently. So unfortunately, we'll have to see how all this very much plays out. So as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all